Hello again everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about attachment disorders in children and teenagers. My name is Tracey Maxfield. I'm a nurse, author, peer specialist, and a staunch mental health and stop bullying advocate and educator. And for those of you that are following my video series, I am very passionate about engaging, educating, and empowering our kids to take control of their lives and learn to not only manage their mental illness, but also help others. And so, attachment disorder. As soon as you think of the words attachment, you know that it's a connection. And when we think about human connection, we think about love and caring, compassionate relationships. And that is the core problem when a child has an attachment disorder. Namely, they have not developed healthy, nurturing, loving relationships with the primary caregiver, usually a mum, although as society is changing, so that can change as well. It could be that the dad, or if it's a same-sex couple, the primary focus is on whoever the primary caregiver is. Anyway, I digress. So attachment disorder, if you look it up in the DSM-5, which is the Bible of psychiatric illnesses, it's a broad term to describe problems with socializing, emotional moods, the regular behaviors that you would see in maybe a normal, healthy, well-adjusted child or teenager. And an attachment disorder routinely begins between the ages of 1 and 5, because those are the developmental stages for a child, for a baby actually, as it's progressing to an infant, to a toddler, to a young child. And that is when that nurturing, that need to have safety and love and compassion and have an adult, a trusted adult who can give that to you. This is what a young child, a baby, an infant craves. And actually in the blog post that will accompany this, I actually put up a number of theories, such as Erickson's theory, where he shows what the steps are in development of a child through to adulthood. And similarly, Erickson's theory, where it shows if certain stages in a baby, infant, toddler's life is disrupted, then the impact is long-term. Now, as you've probably been aware, if you followed my other videos, we've already discussed how the current environment and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, can impact on the growing and developing brain in a child and a teenager. And so you can think, if you have an infant that maybe is shifted between different caregivers, so doesn't really have a primary caregiver, or maybe grows up in, foster care homes or orphanages. It could be somebody that, a child that has lost one or both of its parents or primary caregivers, and of course abuse. And so the first disorder that I'm going to talk about is actually RAD, Reactive Attachment Disorder. This disorder is directly linked to a baby, an infant, a toddler experiencing gross neglect and abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, during those critical periods when the human brain is developing, and where you need to meet that need for nurturing and love. So I think it's important as we go through this to just keep remembering attachment is primary caregiver, compassion, nurturing, love, safety, belonging. And so what we find is, because the child is not getting that, and if there is obviously serious neglect and abuse, The child, as it grows up, is going to be withdrawn and a little sullen. They may say it's a little moody. It will withdraw from adults. It's actually, the child will be very scared of them. And you will see a child that does not want to be hugged or touched. If someone actually hugs or embraces them or comes near them, they'll kind of make a motion to back off and maybe say something like, "Oh, don't do that, that hurts," or something. They'll be very moody. There'll be frequent angry outbursts, and there'll be a great difficulty for them to develop any kind of trust in relationship, not only with an adult, but also with the child. They will frequently be seen as having tantrums and disobedient, and that's because they don't know what love is and belonging and safety. So likewise, they're unable to show it. Because that part of the brain it never went there, for want of a better word. Now, the confusion that we have with reactive attachment disorder is in the very early stages, it will present as similar to autism spectrum disorder, ASD, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that's why it's important that you monitor the signs and symptoms and the time frame and make a record, so then the doctor can make an accurate diagnosis. Now, if the child is not assessed and treated appropriately, then the child will grow up to be a teenager with reactive attachment disorder. And the challenge that you're going to have there is that you will have a teenager, to all intents and purposes, looks and presents as a normal teenager, but the brain is stuck in that developmental stage of being a toddler. And so you will have someone that's actually very immature. They will not have a good family system. They will seem like an outsider. They will not have friends, and when they do have friends, they only want them to be in control and to be on their terms. Because this is a child, a teenager that has never experienced love and does not know how to express it, they have a very warped view of what it is. And so they will have many friends, because they want friends that will do as they say and follow me and do what I want to do. If they don't agree, then that friend is gone. What you will find with teenagers is that when they do have someone that they can actually feel that emotionally there's something going on, physical attraction, when you think of teenage hormones, and a sexual attraction, they'll actually almost get a little claustrophobic and obsessive about the relationship and actually kind of start getting aggressive or stalking. Also, what we find is that a teenager who has a reactive attachment disorder could engage in other risky behaviors, and it's not unusual for a teenager with reactive attachment disorder to actually begin sexual relationships very quickly, because they see that as a way of satisfying what they consider is their need for love. As you can see, it's all very skewed. Now, with appropriate and accurate diagnosis and treatment, which comprises therapy, obviously a lot of therapy, there's not a magic pill to deal with this therapy, then these trust issues can be worked through, and there's an important need only for individual therapy and family therapy, but there's also need for the child or the teenager to go through cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, and maybe even art and play therapy, so they're able to express themselves. Now, the opposite attachment disorder to that is called DSED, disinhibited social engagement disorder. Disinhibited social engagement disorder. And these are, again, children from the ages of 1 to 5 that, as the brain was growing and developing, they did not develop a nurturing relationship. It could be that a parent died, or both parents died. We go back to the abuse. We go back to maybe a parent was around, but they were into prostitution or drugs. You can see there's traumatic experiences that are linked to this as well, because it's all a contributory component. And so what it is that there are disruptions in the ongoing caregiving process. So let's say, for an example, the baby and the toddler started developing an attachment to mum, and then mum dies, and then dad maybe marries again, and there's absolutely no love, and maybe there's abuse and things from the stepmom. That starts that disruption in what is a normal, healthy, nurturing relationship. And usually we see it an awful lot in children that are shunted either from caregiver to caregiver, or from foster home to group home to foster home and back again. They're not able to develop a relationship. Their whole conception of what adults are is completely skewed, but all they know is they need to survive to get along. And so they become very, very overly familiar and charismatic. And your classic child or teenager with a DSED is going to be the one that will approach complete strangers out of nowhere and engage in overly familiar emotional language and physical language, which appears much older than their age and actually goes out of the bounds of what we would consider normal, age-appropriate cultural behavior. They're very touchy-feely. They have no problem accepting gifts, toys, money, hugs, kisses, offers from strangers. In fact, they will go off with a complete stranger. And even if they're with their guardians or maybe their new family or somebody, they're with a trusted adult that is trying to form a relationship with them, it doesn't matter, they'll go off with this stranger and they won't even look back. And as you can appreciate, this is very, very dangerous because of the world that we live in now with sexual predators, human trafficking, pedophiles. Having a child or a teenager with a DSED is actually very scary. Again, this is one where with appropriate treatment and interventions, the child, the teenager will recover and will be able to form normal, healthy relationships. However, it's critical to point out, of course, that this is going to take a long time because they have to switch off their inappropriate behaviors and they have to almost go through their childhood again, and it can be quite painful, that transition of recognizing where were the core points that started in their life, which has now led to this attitude with adults. Now, what psychiatrists say is that in order to have an accurate diagnosis of a DSED, there has to be ongoing patterns of behavior where there's the ongoing continued approaching and willingness to go off with strangers, and these are complete strangers, like not even known by friends or family, and they exhibit two of the following, and that is a willingness to go off with a stranger, overly familiar behaviors, language. They almost relate to them on an adult to adult level, which is a little scary because what we're seeing is a child or a teenager, and they will willingly walk away from a stranger, and the key word is they will not look back to check. Now, you know that normal children, if they go off, even like say their new teacher at school or something, they'll always do that look back to check that you're there for safety, but also to say goodbye. Children with DSED don't even do that. It's like, yeah, I'm off, I'm gone. And they have no problems approaching a stranger. They will go to a stranger's house, they will go into a stranger's car. It is very, very scary. And so that is why, I think as parents, as family members, if you know of a child or there is a child or a teenager in the family that is like that, there is a point where this is called, oh, she's so very confident and socially charismatic and outgoing, to this is dangerous. She could get herself into very serious trouble. So treatment for DSED, yeah, it's going to be very long term, but again, therapy is an absolute necessity. Individual, family, and then behavioral therapy. And again, it's it's adapting their preconceived notions of what behaviors and appropriate behaviors with adults is, and turning it back to what is appropriate for a child or a teenager during those stages of growth and development. I hope that makes sense. And so there'll be a little bit more detail, obviously, in my blog on the website www.Tracey and on my next video I am going to be discussing, let me see, attachment, because September 17th to 23rd globally is Suicide Prevention Week. My next blog post and video will actually be about suicide in children and teenagers, the signs, why, what we can do. So I hope you will consider subscribing to my channel. You can just press the button below. And thank you again for your time. Have a good week.